This happened to me more than 15 years ago now, but I still remember it vividly. It's not just the event itself, it's the way that it made me feel. The weight that I can still recall on my chest, and the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. Then add in the gut punch the next morning when everything became terrifyingly real. It was late December in a small town in Texas. We don't get snow all that often, but that day had dumped about 5 inches across our yard. Everything was blanketed in white, and by the time the sun went down, the whole neighborhood was completely quiet, almost like the snow had muffled all the noise that would otherwise come from it. I can't recall the exact time, only that it was fully dark out. I was a kid, maybe 9, 10 at the most, playing in my room like usual, but my room was a little bit different than any of my friends. It wasn't just a bedroom. It was actually 2 rooms connected together. A front mudroom with a door that led straight outside, and then my actual bedroom behind it. The outside door was an old wooden one, solid and heavy with original hardware and a single window on the top half. The window had a shade, but let's be honest, those thin old window shades don't do much. Anyone standing outside could easily peer in if they really wanted to. My parents' room was at the very back of the house, so I was up front by myself. That wasn't odd. It was actually pretty normal. I'd be in my room messing around with my Hot Wheels or some toys, and they'd be off doing their own thing. That night, I think they were taking a shower together in their bathroom, way on the other side of the house. I was sitting on the floor in the mudroom, organizing a bunch of cars into racing teams or something like that, all when I got this strange feeling. You know that prickly sensation that crawls up the back of your neck? Like your body knows something's wrong before your brain does? I paused and looked up at the door. More specifically, I looked at the little gaps at the edges of the window shade, looking for anything out of the norm. I couldn't see anything though, just darkness. But I kept staring, trying to make out a shape or movement, anything that could possibly explain the unease. After a minute or two, I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to my playing. Well, maybe 5 minutes later, that same feeling swept over me again, only this time much, much stronger. Only instead of checking the door again, I turned my back to it. I remember telling myself, "You're just being a scaredy cat. It's in your head." I didn't want to look. I just wanted the feeling to go away. And that's when I heard it. The soft, metallic sound of the doorknob being touched, almost like someone had just laid their hand on it. I froze, completely. My back was still to the door, but I didn't need to see anything to know exactly what was happening. I held my breath, listening, and sure enough, the knob started to move. It was slow and deliberate at first. Someone was seemingly testing it, twisting it just a bit to see if it was locked. And I still couldn't move. I don't mean I was too scared to move. I mean my body literally wouldn't let me. My limbs felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. My chest tightened so badly that it felt like someone had parked a car on it. I just sat there, back to the door, utterly paralyzed. All the lights were off in the house except for mine. From outside, you could clearly see that the only room lit up was the one I was in, and whoever was on the other side of that door knew it. Then the knob turned harder, not gently this time, way more force, like someone had figured out the lock might be weak. I should explain now. This door didn't have a modern lock. It was one of those that required a skeleton key, meaning the knob itself could turn freely unless you locked the separate deadbolts. Thankfully, we had 2 installed, one at the top, one at the bottom. But whoever was outside, they didn't know that. The moment the knob turned all the way, I bolted up and backed against the wall, about 5 feet away from the door. I didn't even remember standing. I just found myself there, glued against the wall, staring at the door in complete silence now. Then it happened again. The knob began to turn, slowly, like they were now testing to see if it would open. When the knob made it 360 degrees and the door didn't budge, that's when whoever it was started pushing against it. The door shook a little, softly at first, but then came the pounding. Someone kicked the door. Once, twice, a third time. Each kick rattled the door frame. It was like the sound finally broke whatever spell I was under. I screamed as loud as I possibly could and sprinted to the back of the house, yelling for my parents. They were still in the bathroom when I reached them, soaking wet and confused. I remember yelling something like, "Someone's trying to get in." They both ran up to the front with me, but they didn't even bother to look outside. They checked the door, wiggled the knob, then looked around inside the mudroom. "It's probably just an animal," my dad said. "Or maybe the wind." "Dad, someone was just kicking it," I remember insisting. "They were trying to get in." But neither of my parents were having it. Old house, creaky door, kid with an overactive imagination. That was their verdict. They told me to calm down and to go get into bed. No one even looked out the window. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed for hours, staring at that doorknob. I remember the way the light from the street lamps made it shimmer slightly in the dark. Every little creak or actual gust of wind outside made me jump. I felt like if I looked away even for a second, something would rush in. Eventually, though, I must have passed out from the exhaustion because the next thing I remember, I was being shaken awake. This time, my parents weren't skeptical. They were the rattled ones. My mom was sitting on the edge of my bed, gripping my shoulders and asking, in a very serious tone, why did I think someone tried to break in? I told them everything that I had told them the night before again, step by step. Only this time, they chose to listen. Once I finished, they took me by the hand and walked me to the front door. My dad didn't say a word. He just pointed at the snow-covered yard. At that point, it was clear as day to see. You could see where someone had walked along the street, cut through our yard, and gone straight to the window of my mudroom. From there, those footprints led directly to the door, the very spot where I'd been playing the night before. There were no prints going elsewhere, no sign that whoever this was had circled the house or knocked on other doors. This person came straight to my door, tried to get in, and then vanished back the way they came. The police showed up later that morning and took a report. They asked all the questions you'd expect, took pictures of the prints, but in the end, nothing came of it. No suspects, no further incidents. Whoever this was walked up to our house, then vanished off into the night, and never came back. And while that held true, I never felt safe in that house again. Even now as an adult, I think back to how helpless I felt. Not just because someone was literally trying to force their way into my room, but because my parents didn't believe me. I was a kid, trying to scream that something was wrong, and all I got was a pat on the head and told to go to sleep. If those deadbolts hadn't been there, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I've lived in many other places since then. I've locked hundreds of doors in my life, but to this day, every time I hear a doorknob rattle, or even a creak that sounds like one, my heart instantly skips a beat. Because for one night, there was a stranger standing just inches away from me, separated by nothing but an old wooden door and a couple of metal locks. That's the feeling that I'll never forget. I was actually just looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I may have deleted it on accident. By far, this has been one of the scariest moments of my life, and in light of recent events going on, I think that's what caused it to resurface. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a kid. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always stay within an adult's eyesight. I have to admit that half the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and just hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of both mom and dad, trying her best to shield me from the horrors that I'm only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place, they constructed new homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for someone. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity where almost every weekend, someone would either be found dead or beat up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet, and we felt safe. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too, because in her head, we were just more safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, which we absolutely loved. I'm not sure what we happened to do on this particular day. We probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark that night, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows, one that faces the backyard and the other that faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were still open from the day. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them open. I think I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them, and had this false sense of security knowing that there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of it, I felt protected, almost as if my room was invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell each other scary stories. By this time, it was really late, and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out thinking someone could be lurking outside peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were talking about. We got through a couple more classic stories. Think The Hook Killer or La Llorona. And that's when we started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they had seen or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, muscles clenched when suddenly there was a loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was an angry knock from the onset, one that you felt throughout your entire body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there still, not knowing what to do, my mind frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that someone would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud when you open it. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open at all. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with a light on. You would have passed by 2 others before you got to mine. A million questions running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. This is Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because that really makes sense. A 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night just to scare us. In what felt like ages but was likely only a matter of seconds, I came to the realization that there was no way it could be your little brother. The knocks only continued. They were loud and angry, yet no one was saying a thing. Both Tiffany and I were frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort, where I knew we couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made every muscle in my body weak. Then, silence. The knocking just stopped. I felt my body ease up a bit. Maybe whoever was out there had left. And right on time, cue a preteen brain. We decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep in her room, and we weren't going to bother her. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our body as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something, anything. Neither of us wanted to be the one to do it though. But it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked. Our windows have bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step I took, the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb. As I inched my face closer to the peephole, holding my breath, I look out, and I suddenly felt both hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or to slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night. But instead, standing on my porch, I saw an unfamiliar man. I have no idea who this guy was, but he was standing awkwardly close to the door. With everything else that had happened leading me up to this moment, it didn't feel right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quietly. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say was, "There's a man out there." Immediately, she says, "Do you think we should tell your mom?" Although it had a question mark at the end, it wasn't a question. It was much closer to a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung right up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind the door for what seemed like ages, just trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we heard footsteps coming back towards us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pound in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door swung open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it, that the man that was on our front doorstep was now gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was vague answering them all. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed, and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off, and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was that, and it was the end of the story. For now. The next day, I was sitting in my room, and I heard my mom talking to someone. I've always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I may be quiet, but that's so I can hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened up. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, she opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed help. The man stammered as if trying to think of a story, and he introduced himself as our neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was, just in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't offer an answer, or he gave a vague one, and then pointed in a general direction saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it though. She knew everyone that lived near us, and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to piss him off. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought maybe he's just a junkie, and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket, she found a $5 bill, change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She didn't open the screen door to give him the cash, though. Rather, she slid it through the gap at the bottom of the door. But at this point, the man started getting more aggressive and growls, "That's all you have?" Now my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in this man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's an aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells him, "Yeah, that's all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom's sick, and I feel bad." Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. "I don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine. Tim." The moment my mom feigns a call to my dad, who hasn't lived with us in years, this man's demeanor changes as he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present clearly scared the hell out of the guy, at least enough to drive him away, and fast. Hearing all of this sent a chill through me, thinking that he probably thought me and Tiffany were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in. Again, cue preteen brain. Oh well, he's gone now. I better go download that Usher album. We never saw that man again. Clearly, he wasn't a neighbor of ours, and he definitely wasn't trying to fundraise for a sick mother. Glad my mom was savvy enough to get him off of our porch. Glad that we were smart enough to wake her up when we did. I have no clue what that man actually wanted, but it most likely wasn't to compliment us on our fort architecture skills. We recently had a pool installed in our backyard, something we'd been saving up for and looking forward to for a long time. It was our way of turning the space into something fun and relaxing, especially now that our kids are out of the house and we have more time to enjoy the quiet. But with construction came its fair share of chaos. One thing that got totally wrecked during the dig was our landscape lighting. The crew had to cut through wiring to make room for the pool, and while the final product looks great, it left our yard pitch black at night until we could get the lighting redone. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but we've got 3 dogs. Every night, they head out to the yard for their final bathroom break before bed. It's usually me who takes them out, bundled up in a coat, standing on the patio waiting for them to do their thing. There's our older girl, a sweet rescue who's a mix between a lab and a corgi, stocky and protective with a surprisingly deep bark. Then there are our 2 pugs, short and snorty, and definitely not brave enough to wander too far from the porch. So one night, about a month ago, the usual routine was playing out. It was a cold and overcast night, one that has no moonlight, just a heavy blackness hanging over everything. Our backyard is long and narrow, with old trees lining the back fence. We have a gate set up around the pool that deters the pups, so we didn't have to worry about the dogs getting in trouble there. I stepped out onto the patio, pulling on my boots, while the dogs darted ahead of me into the yard. The pugs always meander out a few feet, then wait to be escorted the rest of the way. But our rescue girl? She took off like she was on a mission. Not the usual sniff and wander. She was bolting full speed and barking like she meant it. At first, I thought she might be honed in on a skunk or a raccoon. We live close enough to the woods that it wouldn't be surprising. But then I noticed how the pugs had frozen a few feet away, barking nervously but not daring to follow her. That's when I started to feel the knot in my stomach. I called her name, once, twice, but she just kept going. The barking turned more aggressive, louder even, and then, just like that, it stopped. What followed was an absolutely horrible yelp, high-pitched and obviously pained. followed then by silence. My heart dropped. I scooped up the pugs, now squirming in my arms, and ran awkwardly through the dark, calling for her again and again. When I finally saw her, she was lying on her side near the back tree line, completely still. Just as I reached her, the neighbor's motion sensor light flicked on, casting a strange yellow glow over the fence and giving me my first clear look. My pup wasn't bleeding. There were no bite marks and no obvious wounds. She tried her best to get up, but she clearly struggled at first. After a few more moments of effort, she was able to push herself upright and started limping back towards the house. She was a step slower than normal, but it's clear that she was beelining to the back door like she knew she needed to get inside. I coaxed her along as we moved, whispering encouragements while glancing nervously over my own shoulder. That motion light had gone off at a very convenient time, and I couldn't shake the thought of what might have triggered it. Once we got back inside, I yelled for my husband and explained everything. We checked her over top to bottom and found nothing. No cuts, no blood, not even sore paws. Whatever had happened out there, it had left no obvious mark. After some considerable thought on the matter, we eventually settled on the theory that it wasn't an animal out there. There had been a person in our yard, likely hiding near the back trees. When the dogs ran out, they startled whoever it was, and our girl likely got too close. Whoever it was must have kicked her hard to get her away, and then scrambled over the fence themselves. Well, the next morning, still rattled, we decided to check out the yard a bit more thoroughly. I didn't expect to find anything. It's rare to get any real answers in moments like these. But there were boot prints. Not ours. Large, deep ones in the soft soil near the back tree line. And then again closer to the fence. While checking out the second set of prints, I spotted something that made my stomach drop. There was a crushed cigarette butt tucked behind one of our landscaping rocks. Now, neither myself nor my husband smoke. None of our friends do either, and the position of it made it clear that someone had been hanging out there. I'm not sure for how long, but at least long enough to kill an entire cig. What unnerved me the most wasn't that someone had been in our yard. It was the not knowing why. There's nothing back there worth stealing. We don't keep anything valuable outside, so what were they doing? Watching us? Scoping out the house? That night shook me in a way that I didn't expect. Our brave girl thankfully bounced back quickly. No internal injuries, and she's back to her usual self. But I'm not. That feeling of being watched, of someone hiding just outside the edge of your vision, that stuff stays with you. We had the landscape lights fixed within a few days, and even added motion sensors of our own. But that same unease, it still lingers. Maybe it was a homeless person, or, for whatever reason, a neighborhood teen cutting through our yard. Maybe it actually was someone casing the place. I don't know if I'll ever really know. These days, I pause just a little bit longer before heading to bed at night. I flick the porch light on, even when I don't need to. I find myself checking locks more than once, always looking for something that just doesn't feel right. I used to feel comfortable in my own yard. It was just a place the dogs ran through, where our kids used to play, where we'd sit in the summer and watch the sun dip below the trees. But now, everything feels different, like a line's been crossed. I don't know who was out there that night. I don't know what they wanted, but I know what it felt like when my dog ran straight towards something she couldn't see and ended up hurt because of it. I know now just how fast that feeling of safety can vanish.